had some questions about how to annotate a poem. So I'm just going to show you my version of these poems annotated and the process of doing that. So at the top of my sheet here, I've got a list of things that I'm looking for with a poem. The first one, the most important, is the meaning. I'm going to need to tie any techniques that I find into the meaning anyway. Language, tone, techniques, structure in terms of stanzas or lines, theme, setting, and the voice or persona. So I'm keeping all of these things in my mind as I go through the poem. Now, the one thing that has to be said is you can't shoehorn things into the poem that aren't there, so you have to be careful to make sure your annotation is relevant for the specific poems that you've been given, which is why there isn't really a checklist here. But I'm looking for anything on any of these things that I can say something meaningful about in the exam and that I can compare between the two poems. So if I look at More Dangerous Air, there's quite a lot of different techniques that I've picked up on here. And again, the point of this is not to say all the techniques there are in the poem. The point is to find a few points of contact with the other poem, September 1918, and then make a meaningful comparison. I've talked about the placing of the text in the Cuban Missile Crisis. This two-line stanza to open. It's quite an interesting way to open because it juxtaposes what the newsmen are saying and what the teachers are saying. The end of the world. Could be quite hyperbolic, exaggerated, but it does give strong stakes to start the poem. Teachers are obviously a lot closer to the children than newsmen, so the children are going to be terrified if this is what their teachers are telling them. And then we have the description of what it's like at school for the child, looking up at the Cuban cursed sky. I like the alliteration there, the harsh k sound that's continued in sky. Search for a streak of light, listen for a piercing shriek, the whistle that will warn us as poisonous A-bombs zoom close. So obviously that's a nuclear threat there, the atomic bomb. And the ambiguity of this conflict, this post-World War II nuclear arms race, and the tension of the Cuban Missile Crisis was essentially a time of waiting for someone to push a button. So it was a very different type of conflict to the World Wars, for example. Then we have the specific scenario in school of the drill of what they have to do. Hide under a desk. That's like an instruction, as if the teacher's telling the child. And then this is the child's perspective, which is has got that kind of understanding that's deeper than perhaps adults might expect. Pretend that furniture is enough to protect us against perilous flames. I've circled the P's here. There's a repeated plosive sound there. And then I love this line, radiation, contamination, toxic breath. You've got the caesura, the full stops in the middle of the line, which emphasises the severity of each one. And it almost sounds like you're having to pause to breathe each time. Radiation, contamination, toxic breath. And you can almost hear the child's panic rising as you read that line. Each air raid drill is sheer terror. And I think that's a really important line that really goes to the heart of the feeling of the child persona in the poem. But some of the city kids giggle, they don't believe death is real. The line spacing is really significant here. Death is placed at the end of the line for emphasis. And then that really shows what she believes about it in contrast to the city kids. They've never touched a bullet, seen a vulture made music by shaking the drum in a mill. Really interesting enjambment here. The line breaks. If you're going to copy out any of these quotes, make sure you put a line break in so that the examiner knows you understand that. And then in this last stanza, we've got a really interesting change in tense here, or shift in focus. When I hide under my frail school desk. So we've gone from the specific instruction, hide under a desk, to when I hide under my frail school desk, which gives a sense of this action is being repeated over and over. These drills are happening all the time. So you're kind of stuck in the poem in this moment of doing this drill, which is increasing your panic and fear. When I hide under my frail school desk, my heart grows as rough and brittle as a slab of wood that fails, love the rhyme between those two words, frail and fail, to protect me from reality's gloom. And then again, I love the fact that's a separated word on its own line to really end the poem on that note right at the end. So we've got an atmosphere of danger and fear. You could ask, is she overly concerned as a child? Because obviously with hindsight, we know the Cuban Missile Crisis, nobody did push the button in the end. But I love the present tense immediacy of the poem and the feeling that we get as we go through it. Now, if we contrast this with September 1918, which is in the First World War, the date of ceasefire was November, so it's right before the ceasefire. I've got this really idyllic picture. I've got the metaphor of the afternoon being the colour of water falling through sunlight, the trees glittering, the houses laughing, you've got personification there. And then the two boys, and I just love the symbolism of the red berries. Is it poison? Is it blood? Is it like an Edenic apple, like Adam and Eve in the garden? Innocence about to be changed into experience. I love this line here, someday there will be no war. So the idyllic scene is suddenly cut into with the adult's perspective of the war that's going on, that the boys are obviously oblivious to. I shall take out this afternoon and turn it in my fingers and remark the sweet taste of it upon my palate. So she then refers to the afternoon like a berry. I love the anaphora here because it builds the savouring of the afternoon. And what she's saying here, she's saying she has no time to savour it now. Although, in the poem, in this very detail, she effectively is savouring it. So there's that odd paradox of she's saying, I have time for nothing but the endeavour to balance myself upon a broken world. She's saying, I don't have time to think about this now. I don't have time to appreciate this now. And yet she does. So I think we're left here, the last line is very important with the brokenness of the world, the change in tone there, the breaking of the idyllic imagery from the rest of the poem. But I think we're left with the question of, should adults be like the children and care less about the chaos? Should adults be savouring the moment more? Now I think the tense here is interesting. It's present tense, but it's recalling the afternoon as though it's part of a long lost past. So when it says this afternoon was the colour of water, presumably this is the same day. She's looking back on the afternoon. However, the tone of the poem makes it sound like it's from a really distant past, almost a dislocation from the current reality. So you've got a real sense here of this only happened today, but it feels like it was a long time ago. And so there's a lot of points to connect here. I've just bubbled around the themes here. Innocence, lack of awareness and naivety versus awareness and cynicism. And you've got that lovely contrast of the boys gathering the berries with the girl under the table, knowing that it's going to fail to protect her. So I love the contact between the child persona of this poem and the boys that the observer is observing there.